This is what BBC propaganda looks like. We'll listen to the context first, and then I'll analyze the video.
It feels like something is changing in Russia. A country resurgent and unrepentant. Russia feeling more powerful, more confident from seeing an American president putting more and more pressure on Ukraine. And as a result, less and less desire here to make any concessions, any compromise. Russia's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, made that quite clear. I asked him, is there any way Moscow would agree to European countries sending peacekeepers to Ukraine? Answer, no way.
We
see no room for compromise here. This discussion is being held with an overtly hostile aim. This would mean no longer a hybrid involvement, but the direct, official, and unconcealed participation of NATO countries in the war against Russia. And we mustn't allow this to happen.
No compromise, but a lot of excitement lately on Russian state TV. America's doing things differently, reads the caption. It certainly is. Just 3 weeks after Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin spoke on the phone, the US has paused military aid to Kyiv and cut off intelligence sharing. Right now, it feels as if everything the Trump administration is saying and doing is good news for Moscow and very bad news for Ukraine. One Russian newspaper this week described the United States as Russia's partner. How things have turned around. Later, a private ceremony in the president's office. Vladimir Putin awarding the Hero of Russia medal to the widow of a Russian soldier. Then off to meet more women whose soldier sons and husbands have been killed. We're not going to give ground, Vladimir Putin said. We need the kind of peace that suits us. In Moscow, there's talk of a new world order and a growing belief that Russia is heading for victory in Ukraine. Russia's confidence fueled by America's U-turn. Steve Rosenberg, BBC News, Moscow.
Now, for those of you who are not good at spotting propaganda, let's go over Propaganda 101. The very first question to ask is, who is the target audience of this video? We know it's Americans because the video starts off by stating that since the United States stopped militarily arming and funding Ukraine, that Russia has become uncompromising, unrepentant, and emboldened. Now let's listen to this ridiculous question from this BBC reporter.
I asked him, is there any way Moscow would agree to European countries sending peacekeepers to Ukraine?
I'm not sure how much commentary I can add here because that was a pretty bare example of propaganda. But in effect, we had a BBC reporter asking a Russian official if Russia would accept NATO troops in Ukraine as part of a peace deal to maintain security. You have to immediately ask, why did the war start to begin with? Russia has been consistent on this from the very beginning, since before the war even started, that they would not allow NATO troops in Ukraine along the Russia border because it considers that an existential threat to Russia. Why on earth would any country on the face of the planet allow the armies of opposing countries along its borders? Would the United States allow Russian armies along the borders of Mexico and Canada to maintain security and peace? That sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? From the very beginning, Russia has been saying that it would not allow that. So why now, after hundreds of thousands of deaths, would they suddenly, quote unquote, compromise? Because that's the key word, compromise. That's the key word the Western propaganda keeps using, compromise. Why would they compromise on one of the most important issues to them and one of the most important issues to their national security? Hey, allow NATO troops, which continue to threaten you along the Russia border, to maintain peace. And if you don't allow that, you're the one that's being unreasonable. Let's continue to listen to this nonsense.
No compromise, but a lot of excitement lately on Russian state TV.
So there's that word again, compromise. Why do they keep repeating over and over that there's no compromise from Russia? Repetition is the most basic form of brainwashing. They really want to drill it into your head that Russia is the aggressor here. Why? Because any country or any power that would be interested in peace would be willing to compromise, wouldn't they? I mean, peace is the greater good here. So if you want peace, you're willing to compromise. I.e., Russia doesn't want peace because they're not willing to compromise. It doesn't matter if it's true or not. It just matters how often they continue to repeat it. And also, what this does is it sets up that framing, right? that we're the peacekeepers, we're the good guys. Ukraine is the one that wants peace, and we're backing Ukraine, and Russia is the aggressor, and Russia doesn't want peace. How? Because they're not compromising. So again, it just goes back to that basic form of brainwashing through repetition that we're seeing again and again. And the funny thing is that they talk about excitement on Russian media. I mean, this is obvious, right? So again, there's dichotomy. If Russians, and notice how they use the phrase Russian state media. So again, they're trying to tie in Russian media directly to Putin, directly to the Kremlin. So if there's anything on Russian media that says, hey, this is good news, well, it must be propaganda. Why must it be propaganda? Why must it be a lie? Well, because this is what Putin wants, and Putin is our enemy. Russia is our enemy. So anything that they consider good, we must by definition consider bad. Why? Because that dichotomy exists. We're compromising, they're not. We're the good guys, they're the bad guys. We're giving you information, they're giving you propaganda. When in fact, it's all propaganda.
Не та Америка.
America's doing things differently, reads the caption. It certainly is. Just 3 weeks after Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin spoke on the phone, the US has paused military aid to Kyiv and cut off intelligence sharing.
Right now, it feels as if everything...
Why is that a bad thing? I mean, again, they imply it's a bad thing because of everything else they've said. When you watch this video, they haven't stated why that's a bad thing. Like, can you explain why that's a bad thing? Why? Because this is an argument based on pathos. What they want you to do is they want you to feel like it's a bad thing. Because if Russia's the bad guy, if Russia's the aggressor, then stopping military aid to Ukraine must by definition be a bad thing. So Americans, because again, at the very beginning of the video, I said that this video is aimed at Americans. Americans, stand up and tell your president to continue arming Ukraine indefinitely, regardless of what happens to your economy and regardless of what might cause World War III. Do it.
Everything the Trump administration is saying and doing is good news for Moscow and very bad news for Ukraine.
Why? Why? Ukraine has lost hundreds of thousands of people in a war that, quite frankly, has no end in sight. Why shouldn't there be a peace deal? Why shouldn't the United States try to take a neutral stance and negotiate a peace deal? Would any country on earth, think about this logically, imagine if you're trying to negotiate a peace deal, and while you're trying to negotiate that deal, you are continuously arming and funding one side against the other, while you're telling the other side, hey, I'm also on your side. I'm trying to create a neutral peace deal where both of you get what you want. Hey, Russia, you can trust me. I'm trying to get a peace deal where both of you get 50-50 perhaps. But hey, I'm going to keep arming Ukraine so that they can keep attacking you. But you can trust me in these negotiations. Does that make any sense whatsoever?
One Russian newspaper this week described the United States as Russia's partner.
Oh my God. So you're saying that during peace negotiations between two countries, Russia describing the United States as its partner in a peace negotiation is a horrible thing. So once again, this goes back to again and again, decades of brainwash, decades of propaganda. That Russia is our enemy. Russia is our enemy. The fact that Russia would refer to the United States as a partner in peace, that's what they leave out. Partner in peace. Well, that just means that the United States has joined Russia and that Russia's, going to be able to attack Europe and do whatever it wants.
How things have turned around.
Later, a
We're not
private
gonna watch
ceremony.
The rest of this is just more propaganda about how, Putin is giving out medals to the women, and largely like the optics of this next part is just going to be, Putin is trying to gloss over the Russian deaths and that, look at here's the victims of Russia's war. The Russian people are actually the victims of Putin, and we need to help the Russian people by liberating them from Putin and blah, 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 blah. That's where the rest of this video goes. But I'm going to wrap this up here. This is what propaganda looks like.